Hello and welcome to On Thriving, the podcast that empowers change makers ready to unlock their full potential to thrive and make a positive impact on the world. Before we dive into the episode, I want to remind you that you can support the podcast by subscribing, rating, and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, and by subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications on YouTube. Your feedback and all of these actions help us reach more people and continue to produce high quality content. Also, if you're interested in learning more about astrology, you can download my free guide called A Guide to Saturn and Pisces from my website at taylorshuler.com. And finally, I am thrilled to announce the launch of my new monthly membership community called Thrive. This community is designed to help you grow, connect with me and other like-minded people to learn, network, and collaborate, and get exclusive access to an extensive library of resources and tools that will help you live your best life and make the world a better place. I'm also offering private text and video chat to a limited number of members in the Société Lune Noire part of the community. You can learn more about the community and join us on my website, taylorshuler.com/thrive. Hi there. Welcome back to this episode of On Thriving, Astrology and More with me, your host, Taylor Shuler. I'm so excited to have my friend, fellow astrologer, Della, here with me today. Della is an astrologer based on unceded Dakota land known as St. Paul, Minnesota. And as a second generation queer astrologer, Della has had a relationship with the stars since a young age. Della uses astrology as a healing tool first and foremost. They enter each reading with the intention of bringing clarity, guidance, and intuition to their clients. Their practice is based in queerness, disability, and anti-racism, and their purpose in this work is to facilitate healing and growth with help from the stars. So welcome, Della. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. I'm excited.
Yeah. So tell folks a little bit about some of the special things that you do and the special approach that you take to astrology.
Yeah, so my astrology, you said this a little bit already, but my astrology practice is very much based in healing, oftentimes overlaps with trauma work, and the direction I'm heading in is death charts. So astrology for people who are grieving a loss of a loved one.
Wow, that's really intense and important work. We're in a period right now where healing is something I think that is top of mind for folks. It's going to continue to be really prevalent, and that part of astrology and that part of all of us is going to grow, right? Our ability to heal, our desire to heal, the necessity for us to have healing, to claim that for ourselves. Part of that is because Saturn's going into Pisces, and Saturn is about building containers, developing maturity, and stepping into a greater sense of responsibility. And Pisces is about our feelings. It can be about healing. It can be about sort of the totality, the ending of a thing. And what do you get at the ending? Hopefully you get some healing and the collective compassion that we have for one another. But for folks who have never heard of this before, can you help us understand, talk a little bit about what a death chart is, how it works, why someone would want to use it? I will just say the name death chart sounds kind of scary if no one's ever heard of it before. So help us dispel the myth around any apprehension folks would have about it.
Sure. So I think the most important thing to start with is that a lot of times people hear death chart and they assume that it has something to do with predicting death in the natal chart, which is not what I do. I know that there are some people who do that, but that is not at all what this is. So essentially, I'm going to give a little bit of a history of death charts just because I think it's important. So I learned about death charts from my mom, who, as far as we can tell, is kind of the only astrologer practicing it in this particular way right now. So she started doing death charts after the loss of.
And can you say your mother's name so people know?
Yes, her name is Moon Rabbit. She started doing death charts after the loss of her twin, and used it as a way to facilitate her own healing, and then started offering it to other folks. So essentially a death chart is a lot like a natal chart, in that it is taking a moment. Instead of someone's birth, it's a moment of someone's death. And the other big difference is that the chart is not for the person who died. It's really for the person who is left behind to grieve. So we use death charts both as independent charts, like a natal chart, but also as a chart of transits that were affecting the grieving person at the moment of their loved one's death. So it really is, it's kind of part transit reading and then part independently looking at the moment of the death. But the underlying goal of death chart readings, at least as my mom and I have been doing them, is to give some information to the person who's left behind to grieve and hopefully facilitate some healing.
Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like we're not predicting anyone's death. If someone asked you to do that, it's a no. I have
Correct.
a similar approach. I do not predict death. I have no interest in that. And there's so many reasons for it. One is that it's often wrong. Two is that we have modern medicine. So the science, I will call it, of astrology, the practice, the study of astrology, the information that would be based on is largely inaccurate today because it was created during a time when we did not have modern medical interventions that extend life.
Right.
Which is going to probably continue with Pluto moving into Aquarius. Pluto is one of the signatures of Pluto is the phoenix, right? Being reborn,
Right.
going through sort of any kind of a death thing. And I'm not saying look to Pluto for death. There are many ways you can have a Jupiterian death too.
Of course.
You could have many things happen. But just the archetype of Pluto being deep transformation, very deep, sometimes painful, sometimes empowering things, but transformations that happen. And what is a major transformation? Death is a pretty major transformation. You're transferring from life to another state. Yep. And Aquarius is like this future focused scientific thing. So I feel like we're moving into a period where there's going to be even more scientific advances in medicine that can have the potential to extend our lives further. And we've already seen this, which I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I'll bring us back, I promise.
Oh, please, please.
But, when I first started talking about Pluto and Aquarius, I thought we're going to see stuff that we're going to find people, because Pluto is discovery. When we find things, we dig things up, where people are much older than we thought they were. And immediately I found an article that popped up on my, Facebook news feed that was about twins who were born, whose embryos were created in the early 90s. And so by the time they were born, the embryos they came from were 31 or 32 years old. So even though the twins were only 6 months or a year old, technically those embryos that they came from, the whole DNA structure was there 30, 31, 32 years ago.
Oh my God.
So, they haven't been alive, but have they?
Right.
Have they been
but
alive?
They sort of have. Yeah.
They sort of have been alive. So, so that's two reasons, people don't predict death. There are astrologers who will and who do, and there are reasons that would be practical or be helpful for people to know. You're trying to plan, you're trying to move, you're trying to save, you're trying to save your money to care for a loved one, and you just want to know, do I have to plan for 6 months of my money and then I could give them better treatment, or do I have to plan for 5 years of treatment and kind of draw it out? Like, those are some pretty legitimate reasons that someone might want to know the timing of a death. But it sounds like what you're doing is, after it happens, you capture the moment in time, just like we capture the moment of our first breath. You capture the moment of the last breath, the last heartbeat, or something like that. And that helps the other people to understand and to grieve and to process to heal and then to move on. I'm curious. I'm not asking you to like give any specific examples, but like, can you help us understand what that might look like for someone? Like, what kinds of things can you look at it in a chart? What
Yeah.
kinds of things can be helpful for someone to hear?
Yeah. Well, so something that that you said earlier was it's not just Pluto that shows up as death, because of course, like all the planets are present, and someone can have a Jupiterian death or a Saturnian death. And that's often the kind of thing that we're looking at in the death chart itself. So, my mom has been doing this for maybe, I'm making this up, but 10 or so years for other people. And I've been doing it for much less than that. And so we've noticed some patterns, but there's also a lot that's still very much up to interpretation. There isn't a body of knowledge about this, but here's an example related to this idea of like a Jupiterian death. When Jupiter is present very strongly, so either maybe Jupiter is conjunct the sun or on the ascendant or something like that, there is often a sense of opportunity for the person left behind. So sometimes this looks like a really difficult relationship that actually allows the person freedom once that relationship has ended or shifted into this other plane.
Wow.
And a similar kind of thing happens with Neptune, but the way that I would categorize Neptune is similar if Neptune's at the top of the chart or trining the sun or something like that. There is a sense of an easy cross. That's how I think of Neptune. And that's often something that the people left behind are both, I think, comforted by and can see when it's happening. So it's not necessarily a peaceful death that Neptune or Jupiter will indicate, but it is it can sometimes be just someone who was really ready to go, or someone who was really aware that they were going to go and had accepted that. And that information is often very comforting to people who are grieving. Just to know that.
Maybe you can repeat that last bit and I'll just edit that.
Oh yeah, sure. Also, now my cat is scratching something, so just hold on. Can you stop? He can't stop.
It's okay. I can't hear your cat.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to go back a little bit. So Neptune can often indicate this kind of easy cross, or someone who was aware that the end was coming.
Oh, so like when you say easy cross, like an easy crossing over into the afterlife. Okay.
Exactly. And I've seen this show up in really traumatic car accidents, but the person who died had been telling people her whole life that she knew she was going to die really young, and she had accepted that. Wow. So from an external perspective, it doesn't look like an easy cross. It looks like something really traumatic. It's not someone dying peacefully in their sleep. But the thing that is so fascinating to me about death charts is that we get all this information that we would never be able to get just from the way that someone died. And I think that this idea that death might be the end for for us on this plane, but it's not the end in the universe. I think that that's not comforting to everyone, but it is comforting to some people. And just knowing that like the internal process for their loved one as they died may not have been traumatic. The person maybe was ready to let go. That is often a source of comfort for people.
That's really interesting to hear. I'm trying not to say like I had to pause because I'm like, it's not good. It's not, but it's interesting to hear a story like that the person sort of knew. And so like Neptune can be an easy cross and there are things that you can see. And so I was just reminded too, and I think it's just the stars maybe aligning that we're talking and having this conversation right now. My aunt just yesterday, I think, time is weird for me right now because I'm in Neptune stuff. But she just sent me a little photo, and then it had like a description on it on Facebook. So a Facebook post is what I'm trying to say in English. She sent me a Facebook post that was about someone who, it was like a story of twins in the womb, actually. And so one twin is talking to the other twin and they're like, what's going to happen when we leave here? And the other one's like, well, it's going to be great. And we're going to meet mommy and it's going to be nice. And the other twin's like, no, like life will be over as we know it. And the other twin's like, well, I want to see what all those sounds are that we hear, and we'll hear it and we'll hear music and maybe we'll use our feet and maybe we'll touch mommy. And the other one's like, no, we're gonna die, basically. Long story short, it goes back and forth, but like one is like it's death and the other one's like it's life. And the whole point of the post is to say, you don't know what life is going to look like when you get outside the womb. When you're inside the womb, you probably don't have huge thoughts like that when you're inside the womb. You might, but we don't know
probably
that.
not.
We're probably not, because you can't even think or talk yet. No one's taught you yet. But it's similar perhaps for death. It's the whole suggestion of the post. Like we have no idea what it's like on the other side. We can't possibly know. We're not supposed to know.
Yeah. And this is something that that you see so often with people who are dying, that they have partially crossed and they are kind of getting information from the other side, and it's often extremely peaceful. And I've heard so many stories of people who in life were had difficult relationships with their mother, for example, and then after their mother has died and as they are dying, that relationship starts to shift even before they've fully crossed. So I'm thinking of my aunt, and I can't actually remember if this was, if you read my mom's book, it's probably in there, but I can't remember if this was as my aunt was dying or if it was after she died and she came to my mom in a dream. But I think it was as she was dying. They had a very, very difficult relationship with their mom. She was really abusive and she died when they were 17. And my aunt had crossed into this world in which my grandmother, their mom, was a totally different person, and all of the things that her own trauma and her own abuse, all of these things that had prevented her from being able to cultivate a real relationship with her children when she was alive, all of that was gone in death. And I think that there are a lot of people who experience this with a loved one who is dying, especially when it's happening a little more slowly and the cross itself happens in phases as opposed to all at once, a sudden death. yeah, people often get a glimpse of that, and it's, I think, less scary than we who are fully stuck in this world think it is.
It's I've heard people who have had a similar thing as well,
Mhm.
where it's not during the cross. I haven't heard that before. That's news to me. Uh,
Mm.
Although, I mean, I have heard stories of someone's in a nursing home and, mostly from nurses in nursing homes because they
Yep.
see this most often and they say, oh, they spoke to the person, like they started talking and I was like, who are you talking to? And they were like, oh, my wife is here. And it's like, wife's been gone
Mhm.
for 9 years, or my
Mhm.
mom and dad are here. And like, obviously they've been gone for
Mhm.
decades.
Mhm.
And I do hear, though, about people who are still here with their own parents who have passed, saying that they now have a new relationship with their parents after they're gone.
Mhm.
And I have Mercury in Aquarius, so I can be very like cold sometimes with my thinking. And it's just like, and if you want to take like a very cold perspective to that, it's like, okay, well, of course you have a different relationship, right? Like, let's just play
Yeah.
devil's advocate. Like, of course you have a different relationship with them. Like, some people might come and say, like, oh, well, you're making it up, or you're like, you can make up whatever you want now and have it seem however you want. However, my
Mhm.
experience with people who share this with me is that it's completely genuine and something really does transform where they are connecting with this person on the other side. And that person has changed, obviously, but changed
Yeah.
in more than just the obvious way. They
Yeah.
have changed on a soul level. They have come to a place of only love,
Mhm.
acknowledgement for facts of what has happened, and
Mhm.
also just love,
Mhm.
right? Do
Mhm.
you see that with your clients sometimes? Are they still in a space where they're sort of seeking to transform that relationship with the person when they come and see you? Or are they just not even there yet? They're in a place of just complete disbelief or grief, or,
Yeah.
the different stages of grief.
Yeah, so I have only done a handful of death chart readings, but in my experience, and I think this is true for my mom too, it really depends on when the person comes in. So I've talked to people within weeks of a death, and I've also talked to people years after. And my experience, grief is not linear. So somebody who is years out from a death can be in just as raw of a space as someone who is days out, but it does kind of run the gamut. There are people who are coming and really just need to be heard and are, I think, less interested in kind of the content of the reading itself and more just want to be seen in their grief. Um, but there are also people who come after trying to figure out kind of how to have a new relationship, especially maybe if the relationship was difficult in life. Um, yeah, and I think that people oftentimes are doing that work already. And it's just kind of like a natural thing to do to figure out what is my relationship with this person now. And the astrology can kind of give some information about that. Um, but yeah, it does really depend on like what stage of grief someone is in. And I don't mean that in the like very traditional 5 stages of grief context. I just mean what kind of iteration of grief they're in at that moment.
Do you find that, we talked a little bit about Pluto, we talked about Jupiter and Neptune. I've talked a bit about like Saturn in Aquarius. It's moving into Pisces. Do you find any generational patterns, or just curious, like your thoughts on some of the outer planets, or if you want to talk about like Saturn's role in a death chart or in someone's natal chart?
Yeah, well,
and maybe I'll just say, like, I personally have had I've been supporting someone who has experienced loss in the past year, and so I watch your mother moon's talk on death charts a couple times, and started to look at the chart for the death and the person's chart, the person that I'm supporting, and it was a lot of Saturn, a lot of Saturn, and a little bit of Chiron, but mostly Saturn going on. And so that's something that I'm thinking about. And I have a lot of Saturn in my life right now happening. So yeah, I'm just curious how you see Saturn show up as well.
Yeah. So Saturn is often an indicator of a long illness. And it's not just an indicator of a long physical illness. So I've seen, I would argue that in charts where someone has died by suicide after years or decades of mental illness, Saturn can show up. And Saturn can also show up when someone has been physically ill for a long time. One thing that is interesting to think about, COVID. So we all know that for the first 6 months or year of the pandemic, there was a big Pluto, Saturn, sometimes Jupiter conjunction. So everyone who died in that year has that in their death chart, regardless of whether they died from COVID. But this Pluto Saturn conjunction in Capricorn is very COVID. Like, it's very very much about this huge structural failure in many ways that led to mass illness. So there are, a lot of examples of that. So in 2021, pretty much everyone who died and has Saturn squaring Uranus in their death chart. And, I haven't focused much on this, so I haven't thought about, like, what do those generational patterns indicate in a death chart? But I do think it's similar to what they indicate in a natal chart, that it talks about the context in which someone was born, and generational planets and generational aspects, depending on how they affect personal planets, can be more or less personal to a natal chart. And I think it's similar with a death chart. But to kind of go back to Saturn, a long illness is often part of it. And I would also think about Saturn in the context of grief, because Saturn is grief. So I think that when Saturn shows up in the transits of the person who is grieving, it can indicate a particularly hard loss. I think that when Saturn is associated with grief, it can be really hard.
That makes a lot of sense, because one of the things I was going to ask you is, some people want to seek meaning, right? So that's one of the reasons I love astrology, is because I personally love making meaning out of things. And I personally find meaning making to be one of my healing tools for myself. Some people, however, think there is no reason. Things don't happen for a reason. I'm curious if that comes up for you and how you think about that. Is there sometimes a reason? Is there a meaning, or is there sometimes no meaning, and that can be helpful for people to know and feel and hear or think?
Yeah, this is such a big question. And I think that I actually tend to lean in the other direction from you. Just that I don't know how much of a reason there is, but so let's see if I can articulate what I'm thinking. It's not so much that there is a reason, but for me, but it's more about understanding why something happened the particular way that it did at the particular time, even if that's not connected to like this higher meaning. But that is something that in readings I've tried to kind of sense from the client, because if someone comes in and says, I'm really struggling with this, I feel like it's pointless, can you please give me some indication of why this happened, then of course I will look and try to give them, or focus on things like releasing the person who died from pain and being able to transform their relationship with that person. But I also think it is a really slippery slope, and it's a line that you have to walk carefully as an astrologer, because telling someone that there was a reason that their 6-year-old died is, I think, borderline unethical, depending. And personally, I can't find much meaning out of that. I can look at the stars and the planets and say, I understand why the transits played out in this way, and I understand the context, but to me that doesn't always translate to a deeper meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's a lot of nuance here too. It's like, is there meaning in suffering? Is there meaning in loss? Is there a reason for something horrible to happen? I don't think there's ever a reason for something horrible to happen. I do struggle with, something has happened, and how do we honor that thing, perhaps, is maybe what I mean. And
Right.
and in honoring, there is a door that opens to opportunity, perhaps. I don't even know if I'm saying this completely right, but
No, I understand. Kind of like making meaning afterwards, as opposed to like finding the meaning in the event itself.
right.
Yeah, which I think is is what my mom did with death charts. Like I think that the there is such a common experience of people feeling like this horrible thing has happened, and it can't just be a horrible thing that happened. There needs to be something bigger that comes out of it. And that, I think, death charts can sometimes assist with, in helping people kind of make meaning afterwards.
Yes, because we are still here. or the other person is still here and they are still living. And sometimes it may feel like, how do I go on? Or I don't want to go on.
Yeah.
But we're here and we must go on. So how do we do that and not only honor the person, but honor ourselves and the fact that there's a time for grieving, there's a time for pain, there's a time for suffering, and there's a time for joy, and there's a time for happiness and for love.
Yeah.
I forget his name, the Spider-Man actor.
Oh, I don't know.
Andrew Garfield.
I don't know famous people. You could say any name and I would believe you.
He was on some late night show. He lost his mother at a young age, and I believe he has brothers or siblings, and he grieved for a long time. And one of the things he said that stuck with me for a while was that, because the host had asked him about his mother and how he felt about her loss, and he said that once he understood that grief was all of the unexpressed love that he never got to share with the person, that's when he became able to talk about it again. And if there were tears, it was okay, because it was tears knowing that those tears were the love that she would be given, were she physically present.
Yeah, that I think is one of my favorite explanations of grief.
Yeah, I really like that one. And one of the reasons that I started this channel, the show, is because I came to astrology at a crossroads in my life where I wasn't grieving the death of someone, but I was grieving a death of something in my life, some really big things in my life. And the way that I talk about it, or the way that I understand it for myself, is that we reach a crossroads in our life and we can choose to go one way and we can choose to go another way. And sometimes we don't have a choice, it's just crossroads. We didn't choose to get to the crossroads, right? I don't want to say people choose to have people die. People don't choose pain on purpose most of the time. But we then do have that opportunity that I was talking about, where it's like, which road, and then how do you want to travel the road? You want to get in a car, you want to get on a horse, you want to walk, you want to run, you want to skip, you want to jump, you want to roll. I don't know. How do you want to travel the rest of your life? So I think it's great that people can have this opportunity to, if it's Jupiter, like free themselves, or free themselves of knowing that like it was fast and easy, and it was, sort of, even if it seemed like it was a car accident and would have been bad, that actually perhaps that person knew, or somehow, I don't know, just it was easier, and relieve people of that pain. There are other things that you think folks get out of this kind of work?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, obviously sometimes it is the kind of Jupiter Neptune kind of death where it seems like, regardless of the external circumstances, it was an easy cross internally. But sometimes it's not like that. And sometimes there are indicators of someone holding on until the last moment. And sometimes there are indicators that someone was in a lot of pain. And those are much harder. Like, it's a lot easier for me as an astrologer to tell someone that it was an easy cross and that it's giving them freedom than it is to say, like, I see that your loved one didn't want to go. And I find this, I would guess that you find this too. With it's really similar to talking to someone about a difficult transit, in that you can try to make it sound positive as much as you want, but sometimes what somebody needs is an acknowledgement of the pain that they're feeling, and an acknowledgement of how deep and traumatic it is or was. And I'm just thinking of a reading that my mom did for a mother whose child had died, 6 or 7, in a really painful way. Like, for the last moments of his life, he was in excruciating pain. And my mom could see that in the chart. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was something like Pluto on the ascendant. And hearing that for the mother was, I think, actually validating. And similarly to how people feel during transit readings, forecasting readings, natal chart readings, I think that death charts can be a way to make people feel seen in their grief and validated in their experiences, um, even if it's hard as an astrologer to say.
And it can feel scary if you say something like that to someone. At the same time, I can understand how that would be comforting to someone. For example, outside of the example of death, I have a friend and we had to part ways. And one of the things that I said to this person as we were sort of like ending our relationship was, if you're thinking about me, chances are I'm probably thinking about you too. This isn't a one-way street. We had a connection, right? There was love there. And I can see how it would be validating for someone who is grieving the loss of a loved one to hear that the person that they didn't want to leave didn't want to leave them either. And that could actually foster a greater sense of connection to that loved one and allow them to say, I miss you too. So when
Yeah.
the person who's still left behind says or feels I miss them, maybe knowing that that other person, maybe they're not missing because I feel that there's love on the other side, and miss almost feels like pain instead
Right.
of love, but that they're sending that love to comfort the feeling of
Right.
missing the person perhaps. And
Right.
to say and to take away from someone that someone died in pain could feel more damaging than to just acknowledge the fact that it was painful and that the death was the release of that
Yeah.
physical pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard because, I think that this as an astrologer, that we have the potential to do a lot of damage. And with a death chart reading, it feels like so magnified because people are in this extremely vulnerable state.
Mhm.
Um, and it can be hard to know if it's the right thing to say to someone, like, I think that your loved one didn't want to go, or even I think that your loved one was ready to go. Like, those things can both have harm,
Mhm.
depending on the state that the person is in and the relationship that they had. And um, it is really tricky, but I do think that more often than not, people, just like with natal charts, you're not really telling people that much new information. Like, people usually know how their loved one crossed, what the experience was, what was happening in their own life. Um, so that's something that as an astrologer I try to keep in mind, is that I'm interpreting information, but I'm usually not telling people this brand new story that they've never heard before. And if I am, I'm probably doing it wrong. But yeah, it's tricky work.
It is. And I think it's important for us to bring up the fact that you and I are both dedicated to being ethical astrologers, being professional astrologers, because we've both been on the path towards OPA certification, which means that we are wanting to ensure from the organization for professional astrology that we're ethical, that our interpretive skills are accurate and helpful, and that we're not sort of like the do no harm
Right.
aspect.
Right.
And that is something that is at the forefront for both of us and for many people who seek certification through OPA. And so if anyone is curious about that, you can go to opaastrology.org and learn more. I just became a certified professional astrologer, which is exciting. It's been a 2-year path for me to get here, and very proud, and would love to see more folks in the astrological community take the type of responsibility that you are taking, Della, as well, to ensure that we are here first and foremost to be of service to people and to help folks to heal and not to do damage. Because as you said, I think that there's a lot of value and healing potential in someone who doesn't tell you what's going on, and you look at a chart and you can, or look at the stars rather, because that's one and the same, right? And say, this is what happened. And someone go, not that we're psychics, that we're intuitive, although many of us have that anyway, because divination is divination. But to really validate that experience for someone so that they can incorporate, grieve, and continue to live as fully as they can.
Yeah.
Curious if you have any last thoughts you want to share with folks, or encouragement, or words of wisdom, or questions that still need answering.
I think that my main thought is just death is something that, if we live long enough, we experience. And it is in many ways one of the most universal human experiences. And I think that the Western world, and especially the US, is extremely death phobic and grief phobic, and unable or unwilling to accept death, talk about death, work through grief, accept grief. And as a, very strong Scorpio, I think that that's a mistake. And I think that this deeper work of connecting not just with the person who's died, but with the death itself is powerful, and can provide a lot of healing. And I think that a lot of the time when people experience, oh, sorry.
No worries.
When people experience loss and are really struggling to work through it, it's oftentimes an indicator of living in a world that doesn't give us tools. And death charts are a tool. So I would really encourage folks to seek out healing, grief counseling, whatever kind of means of processing a death works for folks, because it's important.
Absolutely. One of the main focuses of this channel, of this show, is to help people to learn about tools that they can use to make their lives better, and to make the world a better place as well. And so I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation to educate people on the fact that death charts and astrology readings about the death of a loved one are a tool that is available to them to help them, and to help other people that they know. Maybe someone who's going through something, and you wish you could help them, and they're asking for help, and you just don't know what to do. And maybe this is just one of those little things that will help prompt them, or help them on their journey, put that last puzzle piece together, or just like kind of continue on their path of healing. So I really encourage you to get in touch with Della at readingsbydella.com. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have socials you want to share with folks?
I have an Instagram at Readings by Della, Della. But my website is generally a better way to get in contact with me.
All right, wonderful. Well, folks, get in touch with Della. Also, the book Della mentioned, I will put in the show notes as well. And that is Astrology by Moon Rabbit is, I think, the website. Is that right?
Yeah, I think if you Google astrology by
Yeah,
Moon Rabbit, she'll come up.
you'll find it. And so if you want more information about that book or about Moon Rabbit, you can find that online. So thank you so much for joining me. I would love to have you
Thank
back
you.
sometime and we'll talk about some more things.
Of course. Thank you, Taylor. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Take good care. See you all next time. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of On Thriving. If you found this episode valuable, please hit follow and then rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast provider. Hit subscribe and the bell on YouTube and write to me in the comments. Your support helps the show reach more listeners and enables us to continue to create valuable content for you. Does your work not light you up anymore? Do you know this job just isn't it? That there's more to life and work than feeling irritated and unhappy? You can see both the problems and solutions that would make your clients happy and would make the world a better place, but your employer has another agenda and they're not fully leveraging your skills and expertise. Maybe you know that you're ready for a career change or retirement, or you're already in the process of starting your own business, but you need guidance to put the missing pieces together so you can figure out what you're going to do, how to make it successful, and when to make the leap. If you are a passionate and talented professional, entrepreneur, or leader who has checked all the boxes of what society tells you you're supposed to do to be successful, like get an education, get a day job that aligns with your skills, follow a budget, clock in and out on time, and meet or even exceed your performance goals, and yet you're feeling unfulfilled, overworked, drained, underappreciated, burned out, and either underpaid or handcuffed to your salary, let me ask you this. What if you could love what you do every single day, get your needs met abundantly, love where you are, and love who you spend your time with? If that sounds like what you're ready for, to thrive with more love, fulfillment, ease, abundance, and happiness in your life, then you should grab a free copy of my complete guide to making your daydream your reality, which will help you get from blocked and stuck on how to get from where you are in your job and your life to clear and confident on how to do work you love every day so you can stop surviving and start thriving. The guide will help you identify the optimal strategies for you to not only figure out how to do what you love every day, but how to make it profitable and articulate your why, your purpose, so you have a clear guiding light to build and leave a legacy and make your mark on the world. Whether you don't know any astrology at all or are a professional astrologer, this guide will help you launch your glow up so you can live the life of your dreams. You can get it on my webpage for this episode over at taylorshuler.com/horoscopes. If you want to accelerate your journey to living your purpose and get practical tools you can use to build your life and your business, I invite you to join the community at our Thriving Together level. You'll have full, exclusive, early access to my new materials, the ability to ask me your questions and get your chart read live, and connect with like-minded people you can collaborate with. Learn more and join now at taylorshuler.com/thrive. Be sure to follow us on social media for updates and behind the scenes content. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to tune in. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, keep thriving.